Karen Carpenter, the pop singing star, died today of cardiac arrest. She was just 32 years old.
What if the voice that defined a generation was hiding a heartbreaking secret? Karen Carpenter's iconic sound graced the airwaves in the 70s, from Close to You to Superstar, leaving fans mesmerized. But behind her incredible talent and charm, Karen was struggling with something far darker than anyone could have imagined. How did a woman so adored by millions spiral into the depths of a life-threatening battle with anorexia nervosa? And what led to her shocking and untimely death at just 32? In this video, we unravel the mystery of Karen Carpenter's life, exploring the hidden truths behind her fame, her silent suffering, and the tragic end that no one saw coming. Not her mother's favorite. Karen Carpenter was born in 1950 in New Haven, Connecticut, but her family moved to Downey, California when she was 13. By that time, her older brother Richard had already established himself as a piano prodigy. It was also clear that he was their mother's favorite, a fact that Karen could never ignore. According to Randy L. Schmidt's biography, Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter, Karen's struggles with eating disorders, including bulimia and anorexia, were partly a response to the painful realization that her mother, Agnes, didn't love her in the same way she loved Richard. While Karen couldn't control her mother's affection, she could control what she ate. As highlighted in the Irish Independent, Agnes seemed more concerned with appearances than Karen's emotional well-being. After Karen's first hospitalization for anorexia, the therapist asked Karen's family to express their love for her. While Karen's father and brother did so without hesitation, Agnes avoided the request and even scolded the therapist for calling her by her first name, which she considered improper. In the Karen Carpenter story, a CBS made-for-TV movie, there's a fictional moment where Agnes finally tells Karen she loves her as she walks up the stairs, unknowingly nearing death. Sadly, this moment of redemption was just that: fiction, music. Karen always did things her own way. When she moved to Downey, she made a friend named Frankie Chavez, who would play a big role in helping her feel better and ultimately change her life. Karen joined the school band and was given a glockenspiel, a metal-barred instrument similar to a xylophone, but she didn't feel a connection to it. What she really wanted to do was play the drums, like her friend Frankie, who had started drumming at a young age. At the time, Karen admired drummers like Joe MLL and Ringo Starr. A basic drum set cost around $300, which was a lot of money, and female drummers were practically unheard of. But Frankie convinced Karen's parents to buy her the drums, and he even taught her how to play. Karen quickly picked up complex rhythms and beats, impressing everyone with how easily she mastered the drums. Karen's first band. Karen's musical journey started in school, where she formed her first band with a few high school friends called 2+2, a group made up of 3 girls. Karen wanted her brother Richard to join, but the band ended up falling apart, possibly due to sexism. In 1965, Karen, Richard, and their friend Wes Jacobs, who played tuba and bass, formed the Dick Carter Trio. They played in jazz bars and even appeared on the All-American College show. Richard later shared that Karen was incredibly talented, describing how she seemed to have been born with an innate ability to drum, as if she'd come straight from a drum factory. At this stage, Karen wasn't singing. She was perfectly happy letting her percussion skills take center stage. Begins to get attention. Karen started to attract attention from others, including famous bassist Joe Osborne. Although she initially only intended to focus on drums, Karen ended up singing and made a big impression. Even though Osborne wasn't too impressed with Richard's skills, he signed Karen to his label. One of the projects they worked on together was a song by Richard called "Looking for Love." There are only around 500 copies of this song left, and each one is worth a staggering $22,000. Karen's career really took off in 1967, the same year Wes Jacobs left to attend Juilliard. Karen went on to study at Long Beach State, where she joined the college chorus. The chorus director helped her expand her impressive 3-octave range and encouraged her to dive into pop music, going against the flow. The next project Karen and Richard worked on together was a group called Spectrum, which also included John Bettis, Leslie Johnston, Gary Sims, and Danny Woodhams. Their sound was all about blending innovative techniques with vocal harmonies to create unique duets. They didn't follow the hard rock trends of the time, which was a bold choice in an era that celebrated breaking the rules. Bettis and Richard were even hired to play banjo and piano at Disneyland, where they were expected to stick to early 1900s songs. But when the crowd requested popular hits like Yesterday and Light My Fire, they happily obliged, playing the music that the audience loved. Unfortunately, this led to them getting fired for not sticking to the script. Richard wrote a song in response to his old boss, and he and Karen recorded it. This led to a big break for them when they signed with A&M Records in 1969. Karen played drums and sang, while Richard took the lead vocals. She also played bass on 2 tracks of their debut album, which was originally called Offering but later renamed Ticket to Ride. The album featured a Beatles cover that drew a lot of attention, and even Paul McCartney praised Karen's voice, calling it the best female voice he'd ever heard. There was just one issue. Karen was so short that no one could see her when they performed. Standing at just 5 feet 4 inches and hidden behind her large drum kit, she often remained out of the spotlight. Most of the songs on their first album featured Karen's vocals, but fans wanted to see her face when she sang. To fix this, Richard and their manager, Sherwin Bash, convinced Karen to step out in front, and they brought in Cubby O'Brien as the new drummer. It was tough for Karen at first, as she was used to being hidden behind the drums. But she was a skilled drummer and had always seen herself as a drummer who happened to sing, a role not many women took on. After 1973, her singing became the focal point of their albums, with her drums taking a back seat. Karen Carpenter's fame had its ups and downs. On one hand, she was shy, easily upset, and didn't enjoy being the center of attention. But on the other hand, she had a deep love for music and sharing the sound she created with her brother, Richard. The positive feedback she received fueled her desire to reach even more people. She had a great sense of humor and didn't worry too much about how she looked, which was part of her charm. Ironically, though, that same carefree attitude would eventually contribute to her downfall. In 1974, a Japanese reporter mistakenly referred to her as the lead sister instead of the lead singer. The nickname stuck, and Karen decided to embrace it. She even had T-shirts made with lead sister printed on them, wearing them at several live shows. Where to find inspiration in the most odd places. Richard wasn't the type to be a snob about music, and he understood that sometimes the most unexpected things could spark a hit song. He had a knack for writing catchy tunes and was responsible for arranging and composing much of the Carpenters' music. One of their first big hits, We've Only Just Begun, has an interesting story behind it. Richard's sharp ear caught a melody while he was watching TV. It was a song from a commercial for a bank, featuring a young couple starting their life together. That very same day, Richard tracked down the rights to the song. He and Karen then took that inspiration and turned it into their own full-length hit. The song We've Only Just Begun is typically linked to feelings of happiness, hope, and positivity, but it has also been used in some eerie and unforgettable horror scenes. Filmmakers often play with contrast to create a powerful effect, and this cheerful tune highlights the darkness of the situations around it. A great example is the 2007 film 1408, directed by Michael H. from a Stephen King short story. Known for his mastery of horror, King's unsettling choice of this song amplifies the movie's tension at key moments. Another instance is In the Mouth of Madness, 1994, a John Carpenter film that nods to the works of H.P. Lovecraft. In it, the happy song is played during a chilling scene when the character is locked away in an institution. Cracks began to appear. The Carpenters were at the height of their popularity in 1973, especially with the release of their album Now and Then. Hits like Goodbye to Love, Yesterday Once More, and Top of the World all soared to #1 on the charts in 1972 and 1973. But during this time, Karen was under immense stress, and it started to take a toll on her. She had always been conscious of her height and began dieting in school to try to lose weight. By then, she had adopted a high-protein, low-carb, low-fat diet to maintain a weight of 120 pounds. However, in 1973, after seeing a picture of herself on screen, Karen became devastated by how fat she thought she looked. This moment triggered a series of events that would ultimately lead to her tragic death. The start of the end. Karen felt the need to take drastic action about what she saw as her being overweight. She hired a personal trainer who gave her a strict regimen on what to eat and how to work out. As she started to build muscle, it only made her more dissatisfied with her body. This is what happens when you try to get healthy and fit, she thought to herself. Frustrated, she fired the trainer and took control of her own approach. She began working out intensely while drastically cutting back on her calorie intake. The results were quick. Karen lost 20 pounds, and soon she wanted to shed 5 more. The rapid weight loss gave her a false sense of control, pushing her to continue down a dangerous path. She tried to hide just how obsessed she had become. When you're on the road, it's hard to eat, period. And it's even tougher to eat well. We don't like to eat before a show because I can't stand singing with a full stomach. By the time you get dinner, it's usually midnight, and if you eat a heavy meal, you're not going to sleep, and you'll feel like a balloon, Karen admitted. Her mother began noticing the changes in her behavior, especially when Karen ate with others. She would cut up small portions of her food, making it look like she was eating, but in reality, she was eating less. At this point, Karen was still living with her parents, and even though she was already a well-known star, she was frustrated when her mother would act as though she was still in charge, putting food on Karen's plate. No going back on what has been seen. By 1975, Karen had lost 91 pounds, but her dramatic weight loss wasn't going unnoticed. Fans began to express concern, writing letters to the Carpenters team to say how worried they were about how thin Karen had become. When asked about her significant weight loss, Karen could only explain it by saying she was too tired from performing. Her parents were at a loss for what to do. That same year, her manager noticed that Karen was adding layers to her clothes to conceal her weight loss. She'd start with a long-sleeved shirt, then layer a blouse, a sweater, and a jacket on top. With all those layers, no one could tell how much weight she'd lost, her manager, Sherwin Bash, recalled. Getting away from Agnes. Karen's relationship with her mother, Agnes, was always strained. Those close to the Carpenters describe Agnes as a distant, cold woman who never seemed to give much attention to Karen. Growing up, Karen felt invisible, with her mother focused solely on Richard. This lack of affection played a part in Karen's struggles. One of the things that seems to drive young girls to overeat is that they were often the kids who never got attention, said her manager, Sherwin Bash. In 1974, Karen made the decision to leave her parents' house and live on her own. By 1976, at 26, she bought 2 apartments next to each other in Century City and combined them into one. Her doorbell even rang to the tune of "We've Only Just Begun." Going alone. When the clock struck midnight, Karen realized how much things had changed. In her younger years, she didn't prioritize relationships or falling in love. She was the kind of person who threw herself fully into whatever she did, and for her, that was her career. She knew that meant not being able to commit to a stable relationship, but she was okay with that. "As long as we're on the road most of the time, I will never marry," she once said in an interview. She also felt that meeting people was tough in her line of work, and she wasn't willing to settle just to avoid being alone. But as she neared 30, the loneliness began to creep in. She started to long for a family and close friends, and so she decided to open herself up to new possibilities. Social life. During a break from touring, Karen tried to experience some normal social activities. She spent time with a few well-known figures, including Mike Serb, a successful musician, record executive, and even a politician. She also mingled with Tony Danza, the handsome actor from Who's the Boss, as well as Terry Ellis, Mark Harron, Steve Martin, the award-winning comedian and musician, and Alan Osmond. However, none of these relationships worked out. At the same time, things weren't going great with her career either. People were growing tired of the same old songs, and newer bands like ABBA were starting to appeal to the older crowd. By the mid-70s, Richard had developed an addiction to Quaaludes, leading to canceled concerts for the Carpenters. Feeling the need to branch out, Karen decided to pursue a solo career. After months of persistence, Richard finally agreed to support her. Downward spiral. Karen's spirit was shattered. She turned to Bill Ramone to produce her solo album, and during the process, she grew very close to Ramone's wife, Itchy Phil. Phil encouraged Karen to appeal to an older audience with love songs that were a bit less innocent, O'Brien writes in her groundbreaking 2023 biography, Late Sister. Karen stayed with the Ramones in New York while working on the album, and during that time, she seemed happy. She was eating well, looked healthy, and had a renewed sense of energy. After recording a few tracks, Karen flew back to LA to share her progress with her family. However, when she returned to New York in 1979, it was revealed that she had lost 77 pounds. Ramone discovered laxatives scattered all over his house, and she had taken over 90 of them in one sitting. He believes her parents disapproved of the new, more mature direction she was taking with her music, which contributed to her deepening struggle with anorexia and bulimia. The downward spiral only intensified from there. Things got so bad for Karen that she was unable to travel, so Ramone had to head to LA to finish producing the album on his own. When they finally played it for the A&M executives, it didn't get the reaction they'd hoped for. Richard was especially harsh, criticizing her songs as weak and saying the key was too high for her vocal range. His lack of support devastated Karen and created a rift between them, but he convinced her to shelve her solo project and focus on a new Carpenter's album instead, since he had completed a 6-week rehab program and seemed to be responding well to treatment. Unfortunately, their reunion album was a failure. Falling in love. During a particularly tough time in her career, Karen fell in love with a man who seemed to offer her the stability she craved. His name was Thomas James Burrus, a real estate agent. Those who knew him described him as kind, and according to Itchy, Karen believed he was her knight in shining armor. She was desperate for something to go right in her life. Carol Serb recalled that Burrus was attractive, charming, and generous. After just 2 months of dating, he proposed, and Karen, eager for some sense of happiness, said yes. They planned to be engaged for a year, but in July 1980, they made the decision to marry the following month. However, as the wedding approached, Karen had second thoughts. At 30, she was about to marry a man 9 years older than her. Burrus had been married before and had an 18-year-old son. But Karen was just days away from the wedding when the news that shattered her hopes came. Burrus revealed that he didn't want any more children. He had gotten a vasectomy years earlier and wasn't willing to have it reversed. This revelation devastated Karen. She had always dreamed of becoming a mother, and Burrus knew that when he proposed. Motherly love. That day, Karen desperately needed her mother's support, but instead, she found anything but love. When her life was already in turmoil, she turned to Agnes, hoping for comfort after the heartbreak. She explained why she had canceled the wedding, expecting empathy and encouragement. But instead, she was met with criticism. Agnes told her that the wedding was still going to happen. There had already been invitations sent out, press was scheduled, and People magazine would be there. "You are going to walk down the aisle, Karen. You made your bed," Agnes said coldly. "Now you have to lie in it." Looking back, Karen realized it was a mistake to listen to her mother, but she went through with it anyway. On August 31st, 1980, she married Bruce. It became obvious right away that he had no money and little understanding of how to manage what he did have. Evelyn Wallace recalled how he would ask for large sums, $35,000 to $50,000 at a time. And before long, Karen's savings were drained, leaving her with nothing but stocks and bonds. Burris couldn't even afford to buy her a wedding ring, and his lack of respect and outbursts of anger took a toll on her. It was a painful reality for Karen and for Itchy, who felt it was the worst thing that could have happened to her. They were married for just 14 months before Karen filed for divorce in late 1981. BBC interview. Karen quickly realized her marriage was beyond repair, so she returned to work. The Carpenters hit the road again, touring Europe and South America. While in London in October 1981, they sat down for an interview with Sue Lai on BBC's Nationwide. The conversation took a tense turn when Lai didn't shy away from tough questions. "There have been rumors that you're suffering from anorexia. Is that true?" Sue Lai asked, looking directly at Karen. Annoyed, Karen shot back with a curt, "No." She tried to brush it off, explaining, "I was just pooped. I was tired out." But Lai wasn't done. She turned to Richard, asking if they could discuss Karen's weight. Richard immediately shut it down, saying they wouldn't. "I'm just asking what people want to know," Sue Lai insisted, pressing on. She chose to get help. Karen hit rock bottom when both her solo comeback and marriage fell apart. After 3 difficult years, she made the decision to seek help for her eating disorder. She wasn't interested in taking her time. She wanted to get better fast. The therapist she turned to was Stephen Levrone, who had an office in New York. Levrone wasn't an MD, but he had spent years studying self-mutilation and eating disorders, which were still not fully understood at the time. In their sessions, Karen admitted to taking up to 90 laxatives at night and using thyroid medication to speed up her metabolism. Even after Levrone took her pills away, the treatment didn't seem to make much of a difference. Levrone believed Karen needed to rely completely on him for her recovery, much like the approach to treating anorexia today. To make progress, patients need to be isolated from the illusion of control, often in a monitored center where they can't switch strategies when one isn't working. Family therapy. Karen's struggle with her eating disorder only worsened as she became more desperate to stay in control. Even while undergoing treatment, she found ways to continue harming herself, like walking 2 miles to her doctor appointments just to burn extra calories. Dr. Stephen Levrone, realizing that her recovery was slipping further out of reach, made a final attempt to break through to her family. He insisted on a 90-minute family therapy session in New York, pushing them repeatedly until they finally agreed to attend. Karen arrived at the session fragile, both physically and emotionally, and the experience left her shattered. The Carpenter family had never been open-minded about therapy or mental health. Agnes, in particular, believed that Karen's illness was a matter of willpower, that if she truly wanted to get better, she would simply eat. She saw therapy as unnecessary and resented the idea of discussing family matters with outsiders. During the session, Karen broke down in tears, sobbing as she apologized to her family for being a burden, for ruining their lives. Levrone, seeing the depth of her pain, gently told her family, "Karen needs to hear that you love her." Without hesitation, Richard told his sister, "I love you." But when Levrone turned to Agnes, her response was cold and formal. "That's not right," she said flatly, correcting him. "You should call me Mrs. Carpenter." The moment cut through Karen like a knife, Any hope she had for her mother's warmth or understanding vanished. After the session, the family barely spoke. Richard dismissed the entire experience, telling Karen the treatment plan wasn't working. Hospital treatment. Being in the hospital provided Karen with a temporary sense of stability. By September 1982, however, her body had reached a dangerous breaking point. One day, she called Dr. Stephen Levrone, alarmed by troubling symptoms, dizziness, a rapid heartbeat, and an overwhelming sense of fatigue. Recognizing the severity of her condition, Levrone wasted no time and had her admitted to the hospital immediately. She was dangerously dehydrated, and her body was severely malnourished. Once in the hospital, she was placed on an IV, and within just a few days, she gained 12 pounds. Her body, starved for nutrients, began absorbing everything it could. For the first time in years, Karen started eating full meals 3 times a day. It seemed like a breakthrough. She appeared happier, her energy improved, and she responded well to the weight gain. By November, she had gained 30 pounds and felt stronger than she had in a long time. She was eager to return home and reclaim her life. Levrone, however, was deeply concerned. He urged her to stay longer, warning that she was leaving treatment too soon. Her body had undergone a rapid transformation, but the psychological battle with her disorder was far from over. Despite his concerns, Karen made up her mind. She was ready to go home. Her family and friends, though worried, were relieved to see her looking healthier. That Thanksgiving, Karen seemed like her old self again. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to enjoy food without guilt. She laughed, ate her favorite dishes, and shared warm moments with her loved ones. It was a fleeting glimpse of the Karen they had all been longing to see. Hopeful, vibrant, and full of life. But beneath the surface, her battle was far from over. Her death. Karen Carpenter was just 32 years old when she passed away, a tragic end that felt especially cruel, given how hopeful she had seemed in her final days. It appeared as if she was finally turning a corner. She was eager to start singing again, finalize her divorce, and even had an appointment to get her nails done. But she would never make it to that appointment. In the weeks before her death, Karen spent her time reconnecting with old friends and finding moments of joy. When she wasn't socializing, she was resting, trying to regain the strength she had lost over the years. On the morning of February 4th, 1983, she followed what had become her usual routine. She went downstairs to warm up a cup of coffee, then headed back upstairs to get ready for the day. Sometime between those moments, her body gave out. Her mother, Agnes, found her collapsed near her bedroom closet. It was too late. The world didn't fully understand the extent of Karen's suffering until her autopsy report was made public a year later. The findings were heartbreaking. The official cause of death was listed as tyne cardiotoxicity due to complications from anorexia nervosa. Her body had endured years of self-inflicted damage, but the numbers in the report were shocking. At the time of her death, Karen's blood sugar level was an astonishing 1,110 milligrams per deciliter, more than 10 times the normal range, a sign that her body was failing in ways no one had realized. The report also revealed that she had been using ipecac syrup, a drug meant to induce vomiting. Karen had believed it would help her lose weight, but instead, it had quietly and progressively weakened her heart, leading to its ultimate collapse. Her death was a devastating wake-up call. For years, eating disorders had been dismissed as mere vanity or a lack of willpower, but Karen's passing forced people to see them for what they truly were, deadly illnesses that required real medical attention. Karen Carpenter died knowing her star was falling. In the 1970s, the Carpenters were, quite literally, on top of the world. The brother-sister duo dominated the airwaves with a string of soft pop hits like Close to You, Superstar, and We've Only Just Begun. Their signature sound, Karen's warm, velvety contralto and Richard's polished arrangements earned them a devoted fan base and a couple of Grammy Awards along the way. But as the 1980s arrived, their popularity began to fade. Part of it was due to personal struggles. Richard was battling an addiction to Quaaludes, while Karen was silently suffering from anorexia nervosa. But beyond their private battles, the music industry itself was shifting. The era of sweet, sentimental ballads was giving way to the rise of hair metal and edgier rock. Songs about lovebirds and sunshine didn't stand much of a chance in a decade that craved rebellion. Some critics, like those at Consequence of Sound, even argue that the rise of too cool for soft pop proto-hipsters helped tarnish the Carpenters' once pristine reputation. Even now, their legacy remains a point of debate. Some dismiss their music as too saccharine to be taken seriously, while others, including Paul McCartney and Rolling Stone, argue that their talent was undeniable. And if numbers speak for themselves, they make a strong case. As of 2019, the official YouTube video of Karen Carpenter performing Rainy Days and Mondays had nearly 30 million views. Sadly, she never got to witness how deeply her music would continue to resonate across generations. The movies they made about Karen Carpenter's life were unworthy or just weird. In 1989, 6 years after Karen Carpenter's death, CBS released The Karen Carpenter Story, a made-for-TV biopic about the singer's life. While the film was largely well-received, critics noted that it played things too safe, opting for surface-level storytelling rather than truly exploring the complexities of Karen's struggles. As Time pointed out in its review, the film leaned on overly dramatic and simplified moments, like a young Richard teasing Karen with a pizza, or a scene in which their notoriously distant mother, Agnes, finally tells Karen she loves her on the very day she dies. The film ends with Karen smiling into the camera, an odd choice given that in reality, she would soon collapse in her bedroom, her heart giving out. It almost suggests that despite her tragic fate, everything was somehow okay. For some, a much grittier and more honest take on Karen's life came from an unlikely source, Todd Haynes' short film Superstar, The Karen Carpenter Story. The 1987 film doesn't just tell her story, it deconstructs it. And in one of its most surreal choices, the characters are portrayed by Barbie dolls. Karen is Barbie, Richard is Ken, and the supporting cast is similarly plastic. The film opens with a stark title card warning that viewers are about to witness an extremely graphic picture of the internal experience of contemporary femininity. Haynes doesn't hold back, critiquing everything from Richard Nixon, who invited the Carpenters to perform at the White House during the Vietnam War, to Agnes Carpenter's emotional coldness and the underlying fascism of American capitalism. Unsurprisingly, Superstar didn't sit well with Richard Carpenter. In 1990, he sued Haynes for using the Carpenters' songs without permission and for insinuating that Richard was a closeted homosexual. As a result, the film was banned, though it remains an underground cult classic, with bootleg copies still circulating among die-hard fans, cheated in death. In January 2017, Richard Carpenter filed a lawsuit against A&M Records and Universal Music Group, accusing them of withholding a significant portion of digital royalties owed to him and Karen's estate. According to Variety, Richard claimed that he had only received a minuscule fraction of the money generated from digital downloads, blaming the shortfall on accounting errors by the record labels. He sought $2 million in compensatory damages to make up for the missing payments. As part of his case, Richard emphasized the enduring success of the Carpenters' music and the financial benefits it continued to bring to the record companies. The Carpenters' recordings are among the best sellers in the history of popular music and, after 48 years, continue to contribute a substantial amount to UMG A&M's annual bottom line, he stated. It seems only fair that these companies account fairly to my sister's estate and to me. The lawsuit never made it to trial. Richard and the record companies reached a private settlement, and the terms were never disclosed. From her rise to fame with the Carpenters to her private battles with anorexia, Karen's journey is both inspiring and tragic. What do you think was the biggest factor in her downfall? Industry pressure, family dynamics, or something else? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more content about Karen Carpenter and other legendary artists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel.